we're ready to start, everybody. Thank you for waiting. Welcome to the 5 Elements Letting Go condensed version. So this course I've been developing over the last 12 years. It's a 6-week course and it takes about 12 hours or more. So we're going to start with a story, and this story starts with me as a young child. This is me as the little Hulk that I was, growing up in a family of 7 kids and in a 1-floor bungalow. But the redness under those eyes, both of these pictures were taken after I had a meltdown and full of tears and crying, okay? Why? Hell, I don't know. And all I know is growing up, life was incredibly frustrating because I was taught that emotions were things you were to bury, you weren't to feel. I remember my dad would always tell me that people don't get mad, only dogs do. And what's interesting is when you don't understand your emotions and where they're coming from, and you're not able to express them or someone doesn't understand, they counter-affect and affect other emotions, and things get really confusing. It wasn't until I was in my 20s and I was in my 3rd year of pre-law, getting ready to write my LSAT, and I was done of studying these things, and I said, I need something different. I need to clear my palate and my brain and read something completely different. And I was at the library, and I saw this one book on the shelf that just kind of reached out to me. And it was called Between Heaven and Earth by Harriet Benfield and Ephraim Korngold. And I pulled that book out, took it out of the library, and I read it in a day. And within that, the thing that I fell in love with most was the theory of the 5 elements. And within it, it explains the connection between our emotions and our physical symptoms and our personality types and how they all wrap together. Emotions are a signal of perceived imbalance. Okay? That means that it all has to do with our perception and how we see the world. You know, people think that there's only one world that we live on. But in reality, there's over 7 billion worlds on this planet. And each world is different. Your world's different, your world's different, my world's different. It all depends on how we were raised, how we perceive the world, our experiences, what media we look at, what our religion is, what our experiences are in the world. You know, something was said or something happened or you saw something and it triggers this emotion. And when we don't have that connect with our emotions, if we don't understand the root, we just become emotional. And we react to our emotions rather than responding to them. Our emotions are not something that we need to stay in and, feed off of. They're just a signal. And when we receive that signal, if we know what it's trying to tell us, we can act on it, we can do something and get in balance again. If we don't understand it, we're stuck and we become beings of emotion. Whether it's, just a few hurt words or judgments to very extreme painful experiences. It's all the same. And it all gets stored in our brain and within our body, and it's heavy and it's hard and it's hurtful and it holds us back. Because I can balance someone that's going through emotional and trauma fairly quickly, and they're going to feel awesome, they're going to feel great. But it's not going to last if we don't rewrite their software. So it's important to me to work on the hardware by settling them down, balancing them out, and then explaining to them how to rewrite their software. To rewrite how they perceive the world and how their emotions are treating them and how to use their emotions to find that balance back in their lives again. I get patients and I'll talk to them and they're like, well, I'm depressed, or I'm angry, or I'm sad. Okay? Well, hi depressed, I'm Jared. Nice to meet you. Okay? You're not an emotion. You're not depressed. You're not angry. You're not sad. You may be feeling sad. You may be in a state of depression. You may be experiencing some anger. Emotions are states, not traits. in that you are not born depressed, you are not anxiety, you are experiencing anxiety. It is a state of mind in this moment. It is not permanent. When I work with patients, helping them how to let go anything from anxiety to depression to very extreme trauma, I use this, what's called the 5 steps of letting go first. These steps came to me about 10 years ago while teaching a meditation class about dealing with our emotions and being in the moment. And someone asked me that day, well, how do you let go? And I'm still very young, and I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. And these 5 steps came to me. And I've been using them as patients as kind of like a framework or an outline to help us let go of trauma and emotion. So that being said, this is the gospel according to me, okay? So when dealing with emotion, the first step we need to take is to recognize what I'm feeling. Is it physical or emotional? And what's really interesting is a lot of the people that come to see me think everything is just physical. Like the lady with the stiff neck and headaches thought it was all physical. I've seen a chiropractor, a massage therapist, an osteopath, I've seen this, I've seen that. No one can help my neck pain. No one can fix it. Can you figure it out? You know, and they're so focused on the physical and the muscle and all of this, they forget the bigger picture and all the other elements related to it. So once we figure out that, hey, maybe that physical stuff I'm feeling, maybe all the digestive issues I have is maybe more related to the worry, maybe my immunity and my skin issues and my sinuses, or maybe related to all that sadness and abandonment I'm dealing with. And when we can understand that maybe it's more emotional, then the next step is to recognize what emotion that is. And if you spent years or decades not feeling anything because you were taught not to feel and not to talk about your emotions and not express them, sometimes it's difficult even understanding what emotion you're feeling. And what we'll learn in the second half is that if you repress an emotion long enough, eventually you're going to start feeling another emotion. Or if you express too much of one emotion, eventually it'll counteract and affect another emotion. And so it gets super confusing for people. You know, one thing that happens more often than not, and I don't know what the magic is, but if anyone's ever been in my office, I have one really comfy chair right there, and then I sit in one really comfy chair here. We're this far apart, okay? And when people sit down in that chair, and all right, what can I do for you? And 1 in every 3 patients, when I ask that question, breaks into tears. Even if they're a new patient. They'll just start welling up or start crying. And what's interesting is a lot of times when we repress anger, it comes out as sadness and weepiness. And so people are like, why am I crying all the time? Why am I always sad? Why am I always on the brink of tears? Well, they're not really sad, they're just really pissed off. And that's when I usually say, all right, what did he do? No, it's not always a man's fault, I'm just joking. So once we recognize what emotion we're feeling, then we can do something about it, okay? So the next step is to validate, okay? Is it okay to feel emotion? Yes. There's nothing wrong with emotion. It's what we do with it that's the problem, okay? If we're holding on to that emotion, if we're expressing too much, if we're using it as a tool to hurt others or manipulate others, that's a problem. But there's nothing wrong with that emotion being there. And when we validate it, when we validate the pain and the trauma we've been through, and we say, okay, yeah, you're feeling this way. You have every right. What you've been through is painful and hurtful. And you're very, there's no reason at all why you shouldn't be emotional and why you shouldn't be in pain. It's real. There's nothing wrong with what you're feeling. It's what we do with it. So once we validate it, then the next step is to share that pain. It's like all of a sudden, once you can finally talk to someone about that pain, it's just, A lot of that burden is just lifted right off, and it gets much easier and much lighter. Anyone ever got an email from their boss and you read it and you're like, oh my God, their tone is terrible. And then you take that email and you're like, read this. What is he saying to you? And then you read the email and you're like, out loud, and you're like, I don't see it. Well, you're reading it wrong. And then they read it, and they read it with this tone and disgust, and they change the words around, when it's the exact same email, but because of their perception and their experience with this person and their past, they're interpreting that email much differently, aren't they? Within each of the 5 elements is every emotion, every symptom, every color, every season, everything you can think of falls within one of the 5 elements. And everything's related to it. So when I have a patient come in and give me a list of symptoms, right away it's already painting a picture of what element is connected to it. In the 6-week course, we talked a lot about the personality types and the type of people that are earth people. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about my mom. Okay, she's not in the room, but I'm still going to talk about her. Okay, so earth people are the people that they want to solve everyone's problems. They're the peacemaker. Next up is metal. Okay? Now, metal people are really interesting. Okay? They're very hard workers. They love logic. They love patterns. They love dogma. They love rules. They love things to be a certain way. Okay? They're often a little OCD and don't change their habits. All right, water element. Let's talk about one of my brothers. Okay, so water people, okay, in a way, like metal, very quiet, very secluded. If we're talking about the group project with the water person, okay, whereas metal says, all right, you know, they show up to the meetings, but they're like, I'll do my work, I'll submit it, okay? Water doesn't even show up to the meeting. Water doesn't even show up to the party, okay? They're not interested. They don't need anybody. They're very self-contained, all right? And that's why they can be very difficult people to live with or be in a relationship with. They have a hard time connecting. They don't give much because they don't need much. All right, next up, we have wood. All right, so wood person. Most people have met a wood person. Their descriptor is often used as the pioneer or the entrepreneur. Okay, these people are very driven. Okay, they're very competitive. They want to be first, best, and only. Okay, and they're willing to do anything to get there. Even if that means stepping on everybody else. Okay? Now, within the group that we've talked about earlier, the group project there, the wood person is trying to control everything, tell everyone what to do. They're the managers. Emotion is often the problem because it takes us to one of the extremes. With self-assertion, it's not about anger, it's about saying, you're doing this, and this is how it makes me feel. I don't want that. This is what I need. Next up, let's talk about me. All right. No. Okay, fire people. That's why I always leave it for last, because it's so hard to talk about yourself. All right. So, the fire element, fire people, they love the sound of their own voice. This is embarrassing. They, they're very outgoing, very loud, very talkative, very, again, in the group, they're the ones that, their work may not be very good, but they want to do the class presentation, okay? At the party, and I always love using the 5 elements as an analogy with the party, because if you think about it, the earth person, they're in the bathroom holding up the girl's hair that's throwing up in the toilet, okay? Or they're in the backyard trying to break up all the fights, okay? The metal person is, up against the wall, drinking punch, not talking to anybody. The water person never came to the party. The wood person is the one picking all the fights, telling everyone how amazing they are and gloating. And the fire person is standing on the speaker with the lampshade on their head. Woo! Okay. Is anger negative? No. Is sadness negative? No. They're not good or bad. They're just extreme, right? They're signals of imbalance. They're not good or bad. They're just teaching us something. This is the real power of the 5 elements. And when we understand what our emotions are teaching us, and that if we don't understand them and if we don't use them in a healthy, right way, they control us. They have greater power over us. How many of you, your brains and thoughts are running 1,000 miles a minute, spinning and twisting and going off into the past or the future, time traveling like crazy? Okay, you got your own DeLorean and you're going everywhere, 100 miles a minute. Okay, but if you just stop and breathe and be in that moment, you're okay. Everything's all right. Nothing needs to be done. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to be fixed. You're just at peace. And it's just you. How freeing would that feel? By giving yourself that gift of just being in that moment and not having to do or fix or solve anything. You're just free. The extended version of this course we teach usually about twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring. We do have limited space. I don't teach it in an environment like this because I like to teach it in a little smaller intimate classes, because I want you to be able to share and talk as we go through the course and work with your things and work as a group to help each other solve some of the stuff we're going through. But thank you for coming. I had a blast, and of course, being a fire person, I love the sound of my own voice. And it always sounds better when there's people listening. So I appreciate all of you for coming in, and I ask you to please, for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, and for all of us as a community, please express some gratitude. Take some time every day to just let go of all that emotion and all that stress and just be. Just find some peace. Thank you.